good evening. This is where the fun happens, at least at radio fun. This is a ham radio class. We meet here every Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. My name is Gary, ham radio call sign, Whiskey 4, Echo, Echo Yankee, W4EEY. And this is an intermediate level ham radio class, the general class. In the United States, which is what we're talking about here, you start your ham radio career, so to speak, by getting licensed. And the technician license is the basic license. We'll have a technician class tomorrow night, same bat time, same bat channel. Tonight, the general class, which is the intermediate, and we just completed the amateur extra class, which is the top level. And what we do is we have a classroom studio here. We have a Zoom classroom with participants there who you may be hearing later commenting or asking questions, etc. And then we also stream live to YouTube. So I've been reading some of the comments in chat. Yes, we are on Zoom. And yes, you still could get into the Zoom classroom. I still have openings. We limited at 40, and we're not quite there yet. So if you'd like to, well, I'll give you an email address here in just a little bit. Let me tell you about what we're going to do tonight. Tonight is Chapter 1. Chapter 1, well, we're talking about this book. This is the book that we use, the American Radio Relay League License Manual for the General Class, the 10th edition. That's the one you want because it has the current question pool. You get to see all of the questions and all of the answers that might be on your 35-question multiple choice test. They're all in the book, and we'll cover them all in class. And Chapter 1 in the book and Chapter 1 here in our class is an introduction. We just get things started. We test out our equipment. For the folks in the Zoom classroom, many it's the first time they've been in Zoom. Watching on YouTube in a different time zone, no problem. Also, the YouTube live stream is recorded. So if you happen to miss a class, no problem. It's right there on YouTube. You can go back and join in the fun at a later time and then get caught up, and away we go. So you don't have to drop out if you miss a class. That's how we got started recording these classes. So tonight, as I mentioned, it's Chapter 1 of the general class license. And if you'd like to sign up, so we maintain 2 mailing lists while the class is running live. So this class will end in mid-April 2025. So if you'd like to send me an email, w4eey@arrl.net. If you are going to watch on YouTube, say, hey, Gary, I'd like to get on the YouTube mailing list. It's just that easy. If you'd like to become part of the Zoom class, and you can be here Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, well, say that. Say, I'd like to be part of the Zoom class, and if I can, I will fit you in, and so you can then get all of the information about the meeting ID and the passcode and all of that stuff. So we're happy to have you with us in either venue, and we have very successful students who've gotten their upgrades through either way. So we're happy to have you with us. So I'm Gary, Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, and my co-instructor is Dave Ivey, KE4EA, and I thought maybe we'd tell you a little bit about our backgrounds. I'll start with me tonight, Bruce, if you want to come to me full, if you could. So I was first licensed as an amateur radio operator when I was 16 years old up in Midland, Michigan, which is where I'm from. And back then it was different. We had a novice license, was the introductory license. And so I took a class at a community college for amateur radio. And then the instructor at his home in Saginaw gave me the test. And I took the test, which consisted of 5 words per minute Morse code, which was required back then. No Morse code requirements anymore, just a multiple choice test now. And then a written test that I had to fill out. I had to wait 6 weeks before I found out whether I passed or not, because I waited for that letter to come in the mail from the FCC, and then I had my first amateur radio call sign. And I was very blessed that Midland was kind of progressive in this way, in that they had an electronics class in high school that I was able to attend in my junior and senior years. So for 2 hours every day, Monday through Friday, I got a chance to have an hour of lecture and then an hour of lab time, and it was the best thing. It set me up for success in a career that spanned commercial broadcasting, public broadcasting, industrial television, and commercial television. Ultimately, I worked for a TV station up in Michigan. And then finally, in 1988, with my ham radio background, I actually let my license lapse, but I got my license back in about 1985. I had always listened to international shortwave broadcasts. Now, that's not a thing anymore, but it was back then. And so Voice of America, the US government's international shortwave broadcaster, was looking for people to join its field engineer training program. And they would teach you for a year on high power broadcast transmitters in Greenville, North Carolina. I thought, that's kind of neat. And then they would send you overseas to work at their overseas transmitting stations. So I applied, got the job, got the training, and then spent I spent a 20-year career with Voice of America. 14 years of those were overseas. So I got a chance to serve in Liberia, West Africa, Tangier, Morocco, Munich, Germany, Sri Lanka, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and my last overseas tour was in Kavala, Greece, northern Greece. So it was kind of a dream come true, and I owe it all to amateur radio. So for you, amateur radio may not be a career, but or lead you to a career, but it's just a worldwide hobby that is thrilling. You can meet friends anywhere you go, and it's just a lot of fun. So you'll hear more about me as we go along, but Dave, you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, that'd be fabulous. Yeah, I probably got started in radio by doing AM DXing, as you know, just when I was in early grade school, listening on an AM radio station to see how far away I could hear AM stations. And back then, the electronics magazines had a listing of all of the stations in the country, so I tried to find them. So that would kind of got me started. And then in the late '60s, jumping ahead a bit, as a teenager, I went for my novice license, and my Elmer had a background that was real interesting to me. So I got my novice back then, and that advanced to general, and then what was called the advanced class license. My girlfriend at the time, her name was Vicky, she was also interested in electronics. They had an electronics program in both of our schools. And my dad wound up getting a job. We were in Appleton, Wisconsin at the time. Wound up with a job in Minneapolis. So Vicki and I wanted to be able to communicate, because long distance was real expensive back in those days. So she got her novice license, and we tried to get that set up. We never actually got it working, but that got her foot in the door for amateur radio, and that was just an interesting little tidbit. So I've really been in electronics my whole life. I was with Motorola for 30 years. I got involved with a Motorola service station as a direct result of my interest in ham radio. They did commercial FM, which means police, fire, that sort of thing. And that led me into a career with Motorola. I was there for 30 years in their communications division, where they do two-way radio. So that was great. I had about 3 fascinating careers within those 30 years. The most interesting was probably cellular. I was involved in turning out probably the first 25 or 30 commercial cellular systems in the United States. So those were pioneering days, because there were no technicians or expertise out there. We had to train everybody in how to do it. So that kind of continued on, and eventually wound up in the Chicagoland area, and then their downsizing caught up, and that caused me to wind up in Greenville, South Carolina. And been here for probably 15 to 20 years now. So I'm involved in teaching radio classes with Gary here, also involved with Summits on the Air, Parks on the Air, been involved with CW contesting lately, and just having a lot of fun with ham radio. I've been retired now for about 7 years, so that makes a little bit more time for ham radio. And personal motivation, what really turns me on is helping people do things that they didn't think that they were able to do. A lot of people look at the license manuals and they just shiver in terror. You know, that if they don't have a technical background, they think the math is too hard. Well, Gary and I will help you through all of that. And that really excites me to see people cross that goal line, so to speak. So a little brief background on me.
And we'll hear from both of us as we go along. And that's the thing, we want you to have fun. We want this to be a fun experience, something that you enjoy coming to, but at the same time to have you be able to learn something. And we don't know it all, but if you ask us a question and we don't know, we'll try to find out the answer for you as best we can. So as I was putting together the presentation for the technician class, which will be tomorrow night, and if you've got anybody who might want to get their first ham radio license, they can send me an email at w4eey@arrl.net, that same email address. You'll see it later on. Say, I'd like to get into the technician class, and I'll be able to send you more information. Classes are free. They've always been free. But this kind of excited me because I go through every year and I get the latest tally from the American Radio Relay League, and I forgot to put the URL on this slide. I'll try to send that to you as well. But back in 2022, you can see that we had 772,000 amateur radio operators of all classes in the United States. But then you can see that it's been diminishing, 769, 759, 754, 744 last September. But most recently when I looked, whoops, 745. We've stabilized and we're starting to come up. So I think that's exciting, and I'm going to pat ourselves on the back. Maybe we did a little bit to help get some more amateur radio operators and get some folks upgraded. And the reason to upgrade, well, you're going to have your own reasons, I'm sure. But emergency communications, auxiliary communications, sometimes people call it that. Here in the upstate of South Carolina and also just north of us in North Carolina, when Hurricane Helene came through, amateur radio provided a vital role in communicating with public safety agencies in getting disaster relief to people in a timely manner. And ham radio really was the only communication available up in North Carolina. I want to highly recommend this URL, and we'll give you a link in an email tomorrow with ways to get into this presentation as a PDF. So all of the links will be active. You'll be able to just click on these. But Tom Witherspoon, K4SWRL, is a friend of ours, and he has quite a story up in Swannanoa, North Carolina, and the trials and tribulations that he went through up there. And ham radio was a vital part of recovery up there. Because as they say, when all else fails, amateur radio gets through. And so we'd like to think that. So my own story comes from, well, this guy, the Voice of America, where I worked for 20 years. I mentioned I got the training in Greenville, North Carolina, and my first overseas assignment for Voice of America was in Liberia, West Africa. The Voice of America had a large broadcast transmitting station just northeast of Monrovia, the capital city of Liberia. In fact, here's the antenna field as it looked at the Liberia relay station. So this was my first overseas assignment for VOA. And this was the transmitter hall, the pictures, the things you find online. It's unbelievable. But we had a number of General Electric 250,000 watt transmitters, and then some smaller transmitters. And we received Voice of America programs from the studios in Washington, D.C., and then rebroadcast them on international shortwave frequencies from the relay station in Liberia. my office was just off to the side there in a little cubicle. And that, as I mentioned, was the first overseas assignment of my career. That was back in about 1989. And at Christmas time in 1989, Charles Taylor and his band of merry men decided that they were going to stage a coup in Liberia. And so they came across the border from the Ivory Coast and came into Liberia, ultimately making their way down to Monrovia. And my wife and 2 kids and other families were all evacuated by the U.S. State Department from Liberia. I was part of a group of 5 that stayed behind to keep the station running. And during that time, I maintained a daily schedule on amateur radio with Jack Moss, the then station manager of the Greenville, North Carolina station. And without amateur radio, this was the only way that they really had for them to know that we were still doing okay. We didn't conduct business. It was just giving status of yeah, we're healthy, we're fine. We think the rebels are probably here or there or wherever. And so this was what ham radio did for me, and it was the high frequency bands that allowed me to communicate from a tri-band antenna much like this to Jack back in North Carolina on a daily basis. So HF communications, ham radio can be very important. It would have been impossible without HF radio. And the general class, when you upgrade from technician to general, it gives you access to high frequency or short wave radio frequencies. You get more frequencies, more modes become available because more modes are used on the HF bands. There are technical opportunities for you to learn about antennas and matching, and it's a lot of fun to get together with other hams as well and operate on HF. For me, the big reason to upgrade is 20 meters. The 20 meter band, 14 megahertz, is open to most anywhere all the time. I mean, it's not open to everywhere all the time, but you can get on the band and find DX contacts, distant contacts available. And with your general class license, you can get on to 20 meters. So back in the day when we first did this presentation, I put this slide together. You've already heard some of Dave's big reasons to upgrade. Dave was one of the first of us to get involved with FT8 and then FT4. So he dragged us kicking and screaming into the digital modes, and then Parks on the Air, Summits on the Air, and as he mentioned, he's now very active in CW and CWDX. CW is our term for Morse code. So what we're going to do in this class is for those of you who have your technician class license now, we'll get you up to the next level. We're going to prepare you to pass a 35-question multiple choice test. Now, anyone who had a technician license before 1987, which is probably not many of you, but there is a way for you to upgrade to general automatically, so I just mentioned that. I did mention that Morse code is no longer required, but Morse code is as popular or more popular now than it ever has been. And so we recommend the Long Island CW Club. It's a great organization if you'd like to learn Morse code while you learn the knowledge for upgrading your license. And also there's some Morse code training videos on my YouTube channel, W4EEY, that's the name of the channel. So you don't have to know Morse code anymore. It's not a worldwide requirement. The ITU dropped that requirement, but it still is a very popular mode of operation. So this is the book, as I mentioned, the ARRL License Manual General Class, 10th edition. There's a URL on Amazon for those who might want to go ahead and get it from there. What we're going to be doing is covering one chapter in the book a week, with the exception of chapter 4. There's so much material in that one that we're going to split that one in half and do it over 2 weeks. So that's why this class is 11 weeks long, whereas the technician class is only 10 weeks long. Chapter 1, as I mentioned, is an introduction, so no test questions are going to be talked about tonight. But what I would like you to do for next week, please, is to read chapter 2, Procedures and Practices. If you can read ahead of the class, take notes about what you're reading, bring that with you to class, and then listen to the class. And by getting the information from two different directions, then I think it'll help it to sink into your brain. And Dave will talk more about learning as we go along. So this is our class schedule, kind of small here, but you'll get the PDF tomorrow. And we're targeting that our last class will be on April the 15th. So what I want you to do is to be thinking about where and when you are going to take your general upgrade test. So it's going to probably be toward the end of April, and I'd like you to go ahead and think about scheduling that. Now, the test, as I mentioned, is 35 questions. There are 429 questions in the general class question pool, and you need to get 74% or 26 right in order to pass. And we're going to prep you to do that. Also, one of the handouts that we'll give you starting next week is something called the Right Answers Study Guide that goes chapter by chapter with the questions and just the right answers from that chapter. So that might be helpful for you in associating a question with a right answer. But the question I have for you is, where and when will you take your test? Kind of think about that right now, and then maybe tomorrow go ahead and put it on your calendar, schedule it if you need to get a reservation. Can you take your upgrade test online? Yes, you can. You don't have to go to a club or anything. You can go to this URL, hamstudy.org/sessions. And there you'll find both in-person and online testing. And go take a look and see what's available at the end of April, and maybe think about scheduling your test. Having a definite goal and a date certain will be a motivator for you, because you are the key to your success. All of the info that you need to pass the test is in the book and going to be in the class, but your motivation is the secret ingredient. If you want to get your upgrade, you will. So we ask that you bring your book to our class, although your class is at home here. We will talk about the TI Model 36X Pro calculator. That's the one that we recommend. But don't worry, there's really no heavy math problems here in the general class. There are more math issues or math problems coming up in the extra class, but not to worry. We'll get you through that too as well. If you could, please sign up for a free account at the ARRL Exam Review website, this URL here. It's free, and it will allow you to review test questions from the chapter after we go through them. And also at the end of the class, it'll allow you to take some practice exams, which is a very good way to study. If you are a member of the American Radio Relay League, we will provide you with links to the old man, or the original gangster of YouTube videos for ham radio, Dave Kassler, K-E-0-O-G. He's done his own introductory videos corresponding to the book chapters. And so we'll provide you links to these. They used to be available free on YouTube, but then Dave sold out. No, I didn't. He became affiliated with the ARRL, and so it's now limited to ARRL members. But he doesn't go over any test questions. That's what we do. But what he does is maybe provide you some additional context about what we're going to be talking about. So each week after the class, I will send you an email with a PDF copy or a link to a PDF copy of the class presentations. Remember, the classes are streamed live to YouTube and recorded there for later review. We want you to please go ahead and ask questions, communicate. I've provided all your email addresses for the two groups in the open, so if you find somebody here that you're simpatico with, you can send them an email. And starting last year, we opened up a Discord channel, which is a private study group just for our students. It's invitation only for those registered by email. So if you'd like to register for our classes, watching on YouTube or being in Zoom, and you'd like to get the information to find the Discord channel, just send me that email, w4eey@arrl.net. Now, I mentioned clubs. Clubs are a great resource for you because you find like-minded people there who have common interests, can help you out with not only upgrading, but also with projects you have around the house, new antennas. I love the upstate of South Carolina because this area has just the greatest group of amateur radio operators. And I'm a member of the Greer Amateur Radio Club and also the Anderson Radio Club. And just so find a club that matches your interests, and I think you'll find it very worthwhile. ARRL has a resource here, this URL, for their Find a Club, and you can put in your zip code, and it'll tell you the local clubs that are available to you that are affiliated with the ARRL. So a ham ticket is a license to learn. When you get done with this class, by the way, this is a licensing class. We're going to teach you to get the general class license. It's not a general electronics class. We don't have the time to cover all of the things in detail, but we will provide you with URLs and information where you can go ahead and study on your own if an area really interests you. But when you get your upgrade, you don't know it all. You just got a license to learn and have fun. And we encourage ARRL membership. They're the ones that produce the book that we're using. And I think you'll find their magazines and the material that they produce there. And they're our national lobbying organization with Congress. So they're the only ones we've got. So it's worthwhile. So if you've got an HF radio receiver, want you to start maybe listening to the amateur radio bands. You can look in the book there, and there's a chart that lists some of the frequencies for amateur radio. Or you can use some online software to find radios. Here's some URL links to some of the available SDRs. Listen to contacts, listen to what's going on, the sounds and whatnot, and bring that with you to class and ask questions about what you heard if something is confusing. So welcome to ham radio, the upgrade to general. It's the best hobby in the world. And for next week, watch for emails from me and Dave. Watch the Dave Kassler videos for Chapter 2 if you can. Come to class next week ready to learn. And again, remember, if you want to get on one of the lists, here's the email address. I told you you'd see it again, w4eey@arrl.net. Happy to have you with us. And if you're going to be in Florida this weekend, specifically Orlando, the second biggest ham fest of the United States is going on this weekend. It's called Hamcation. It's at the fairgrounds in Orlando, the Central Florida Fairgrounds. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're all going to be there. Dave will be there. I'll be there. Bruce is going to be there. So look for us. We'll be around. If you can make it, we'd love to shake your hand and meet in person and get together and just, share ham radio stories. So that's Hamcation coming up this weekend in Orlando, Florida. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 5-minute intermission, and then we're going to come back, and Dave is going to be the presenter and talk to us a little about some numbers and some math, and then hopefully we'll get you out of here early. Normally, we reserve the time from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., tried to go no later than that, and some class sessions will take the full 2 hours, others do not. But tonight, hopefully we will get you out a little bit early, but let's take 5 minutes, intermission, and then Dave will be up here with you.
greeting. We're back again now after intermission. And when I introduced myself, did it very briefly, but I don't think that I shared that my girlfriend back in junior high school and high school wound up being my wife eventually. So yeah, we've enjoyed ham radio together for a good long while now. So Gary was talking about the wife acceptance factor or the spouse acceptance factor if you're a lady, and having both of you being hams helps a lot. All right, so I'm going to look at some general class math and study tips. Chapter 4 is the chapter that has some of the heavier math in it. It's not super heavy, and we'll make it as easy as we can for you, and using the calculator. And if you look at that chapter and get scared, don't be, because we'll be there for you. A lot of tips and shortcuts that we can do. So this session is called How to Pass Your Test on the First Try. I stole that from somebody else. So first of all, since we're going to be talking about some numbers and math as we go along, there's some mystery numbers here that I want to put up. Some of these you've heard already. Gary mentioned the number 429. That happens to be the number of pool questions that they pulled the test from. 10 is the number of chapters in our book. The number of weeks. We actually do one chapter, chapter 4, over 2 weeks, so that makes it 11 actually classes to cover the 10 chapters. 35, Gary mentioned also. That's the number of questions on the test. And what do you have to do to pass the test, you might be wondering? Well, you need a score of 74%. It means you need to have 26 right, which means you can miss up to 9. So you don't have to be in the 90% plus. When you're taking practice exams, we like people to be up in the 90 percentile to give them the assurance that they really are ready. So that's what we do. And then the 90% plus, we don't actually keep statistics on this, although I'm very curious, someday maybe we'll look, but the vast majority of our students, if they will go through the class with us, do the work that we suggest, and do the reviews, the vast majority of folks pass on their first try. So just a little encouragement for you there. So what are our objectives here? We want you to have the confidence to pass the math questions on the exam. And when I call out the math questions specifically, it's only because that's what scares a lot of people that don't have a technical background. Personal growth and insight. The concept there is we want you to know a little bit of theory so that you can understand why the right answers are the right answers. That will give you confidence in taking the test and will help you greatly in what we call your ham radio career. Become a better learner. We're going to share some tips on how you can do that. And we make some assumptions about you. So you'll have to see if this checks out. So math may have discouraged you from the general exam earlier. Some people look at the book and in some chapters they're not scared, they're terrified, okay? So if that's been a reason why you've put this off, this class is good news for you. Some of the study guides questions are perceived as intimidating. Chapter 7 is a little bit scary on antennas, but again, we'll help you with that. We assume that you're not an electrical engineer, and furthermore, you don't want to become an electrical engineer. If we have any engineers in our class, maybe you could just wave your hand at us to identify yourself. I don't see any in the screen that I'm looking at here, nobody waving. Okay, good. All right, so that assumption appears to be valid. We're not going to try to make you one, but you do need to understand a little bit of technical theory to be able to relate to the questions. We make the assumption that you've been exposed to some algebra, some high school algebra, but it might have been 100 years ago, okay? The good news is that the formulas that we need to be concerned with in this material are what I call plug and chug. You just plug the numbers in the same order that they appear in the formula, and press the enter key on the calculator, and presto changeo, you get the right answer. You don't have to solve for any variables. You don't have to rearrange any any equations or anything like that. I don't even like the word equation. I like the word formula, because anybody can bake a cake. That's a formula. So that's the level of thinking that we're going after here. We assume that you have a desire to pass the general exam, and that's real obvious by being a part of this class. And as Gary said, your current license is a license to learn. You have to be willing to try. So I'm going to mention some learning preferences. People who have studied this have come up with a whole bunch of them, but there's three that I consider primary. So and I call these preferences. So first is visual. People use visual guides and models. In other words, show me, draw it out on a blackboard, guide me through it. My wife is very much that way. The next one is auditory. This is oral communication and written language. This is really me. If you give me a book, I'll figure it out. Give me a book and leave me alone, and I'll go at it. And then kinesthetic. This sounds like a great big long word, but it just means learn best by doing. You actually have to be, you're motivated to learn because you have a project that you want to get done, and that motivates you to learn the material. So think about it for a minute now. What is your learning preference? Maybe we can go back or on SuperSource me for a second, and not SuperSource, but you know what I mean, Gary. Spotlight, thank you. So for those of you in our class, and you can be in more than one group, but if you consider yourself a visual learner, just kind of wave your hand. Okay, we got some of those. All right, what about auditory? Or give me a book. Anybody in that category? Oh, not too many, okay. And then what, kinesthetic, you learn best by doing. Okay, good, yeah, number of hands there. Well, so you can go back to Spotlight if you want. Now, the good news is that this class, you'll have opportunities in all three areas. And the reason I call these learning preferences rather than learning styles, like some people do, people, a lot of times, if they'll consider using a style or a preference that they're not normally comfortable with, they can learn a lot by being open to some of these other ways of learning. So what is our success plan? We're going to be focused primarily on the test questions, but we want to, that are related to the general exam. We definitely want you to understand how to work the formulas. We're going to be providing some shortcuts that will make, in some cases, you won't need to use a calculator. Any shortcuts that we know of, we're going to share with you because we want you to pass your test. But there's a great satisfaction in being able to work the formulas, so we want you to be able to do that, even if you don't need to do it on the exam. We want to work through all the example questions. Now, there are some questions that are variations on each other, some of the math problems. So we'll work at least one of each type. So that'll get you ready. Our tool set, of course, our license manual. That's very important, and we'll be asking you to read in advance the chapter or portion of the chapter before we actually get to the class. The calculator, as Gary mentioned, that's a tool. And then something called the General Class Reference Sheet, which I'll be sending out in the next week or two. This is a one-page document. I love one-page documents. It's a one-page document that has all of the formulas and some of the key things that you need to know when you go to take your exam. Now, our license manual, of course, is 10 chapters, and it's many, many pages. But anything related to math and calculations, I've distilled down to one page to make it easier for you to just focus on that. So we'll be sharing that in a future week. The practice problems, of course, are the pool questions. And then mindset. This is a concept that may be new to you, but it has a profound impact on your ability to learn. So let's consider the fixed mindset and the growth mindset for a minute. So a fixed mindset means you believe your intelligence is fixed. So if you're not good at something, you might believe that you'll never be good at it. And people that fall into that category generally won't even try. So that's the concept of a fixed mindset. And if you think of people that you know, you'll probably be able to put some names on this. The other variety is a growth mindset. This means that you believe your intelligence and talents can be developed over time. In fact, this might be controversial, but some people that are in this camp believe that your IQ can be increased. I think that that's true. So growth means if I apply myself, I'm pretty sure I can do it. So drastic difference between those two mindsets. We want you to have a growth mindset. And just the way you think about things and approach them will have a drastic or a profound impact on how well you can learn. There's an excellent article here that I've given you a link for. All of these links should work when you get the PDF. I highly recommend that you read that. And then a concept called the memory dump sheet. I was introduced to this concept when I was studying for my project management professional certification, and the instructor recommended that we write down the things that we want to remember. It'll be different for everybody, same thing with ham radio, but the key formulas or concepts or shortcuts that you definitely want to remember, you create that. It's unique to you. No more than one page. You have to limit yourself to one page. And you put down the things that you need, facts and formulas that might be needed. Sometimes unit values and conversions people put down. And then what you do is you commit this memory dump sheet to memory, okay? How do you do that? Well, you write down those things that you want to remember, then you take a blank sheet of paper and reproduce your memory dump sheet on that page. Do that a couple of times and you'll have it. So how do you use this thing? Well, when you go into your exam, what you can do is take your scratch paper, and the VE team that I'm a part of, the scratch paper is the back side of your answer sheet. What you do before the exam even begins is you reproduce your memory dump sheet. Then when you look at the first question in the exam, for some people their mind turns to mush when they see the first question. So if you've got your memory dump sheet reproduced, you've got a crutch that you can fall back on. This is an optional technique, but it's effective, and we've heard some real good things from our students who have adopted this approach. Again, I'm sharing tips and techniques that are going to help you. The calculator we mentioned. This just happened to be a nice shot that I was able to steal off of Amazon, but don't be afraid of what's on the screen. This is a calculus question. We're not going to do any calculus, but this is a picture of the calculator anyway. It's inexpensive. I looked just before class. On Amazon, I think it's just under $21. I used to recommend people, if they want to get one locally, Staples, but I just looked at Staples and that was like 42 bucks. I don't know if that was a mistake or what. Amazon or Walmart online is $21, so it's not expensive if you get it from the right source. So it definitely covers the needs for the general exam. It goes a little bit beyond that, but we won't get into the features we don't need. And one of the reasons we recommend it is because it is the perfect companion for the extra class license when we get into that. So you can start with the general and roll into the extra. Now, all of the examples that we show in class will be on this particular calculator, so that's another reason you might want to have it. You can track us keystroke by keystroke. I will also be sharing some step-by-step guides, keystroke by keystroke, explaining what we do with some of these things, and those step-by-step guides will reference this calculator as well. I consider those how-to guides as kind of like training wheels on a bicycle. You only need it for a short time, and once you understand what you're doing, you can just look at the formula and you'll know how to apply it in the calculator. So normally, this is a general statement. This calculator may be used during the exam, but check with your VE team. The online testing facilities in particular have been notorious for not allowing calculators. So check with your VE team to make sure you're not surprised when you go to take your test in terms of what you can use. We've heard of VE teams that would only allow a 4-function calculator. It's a little hard to do logarithms and some of the other calculations on a 4-function calculator, and we'll be sharing some tips on how you can maybe either memorize or do some shortcuts to avoid that, but know in advance what your VE team will allow. Generally speaking, though, this calculator is acceptable with most VE teams.
And I'll just say that for the online testing, a lot of the teams will allow you to use the calculator built into your operating system.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Very good. So don't be surprised by that. Usually the way most professional exams and the amateur radio exams, where they draw the line is graphing calculators. Graphing calculators will remember formulas, and that's why they're typically not allowed. This is a step below that. All right, well, enough on that. So also, because our class time is limited, we won't really have time to try to help people figure out how to get to the answers on a calculator that's not the one that we recommend. I'll help you offline if you want me to, but we won't have time in class to do that. So now we're going to move into another area, learning tools and techniques. Now, I'm showing some tools here that you might find in your garage, but the kind of tools that we're talking about are going to be brain tools, tools that your brain can use to enhance your learning. And I want to share a resource here and give credit where credit is due. I was in attendance in 2019, Hamcation. That's the same FamFest that we're going to be at this weekend. Michael Burnett was there teaching a forum class, a 1-hour class, and that's where I stole the title, How to Get Your License on the First Try. I think that was the title of his talk. But he introduced me to a book there where he got a lot of the principles that he shared. It's called A Mind for Numbers, How to Excel at Math and Science, Even If You Flunked Algebra. And this author, Barbara Oakley, is a very, very interesting lady. She was into animals, languages. She studied languages in college and in the military. She was kind of a fixed mindset person when it came to anything technical or math. But she realized at one point in her career that was limiting her. So she set about on a path to change her brain, so to speak, change the way she looked at things. And she's now a successful, she manages an engineering program in a major university. That's a long way from where she came. So here's a link, A Mind for Numbers. I'll share that with you. And a lot of the principles we're going to talk about in the next few slides are from her resources. So that's a really good resource if you're interested in learning more. There's one that's even better, though. It's based on the textbook, so to speak, that I just shared. It's called Learning How to Learn. And this was Barbara and her cohorts got together. They found a person who was very good at teaching teenagers, children, and reformatted their concepts and materials into this book. This book is fun to read. You'll really enjoy it. If you want to go a little further and dig into this, it's a simplified version of A Mind for Numbers. It's really written for kids and teens, but we're all kids, right, at heart. I think you'll love this. It's very rich in metaphors and pictures, which is another means by which we learn. It's an easy, entertaining read for adults, and it's great for what we do in our general class. You know, the Kindle version is in full color. It's like, I didn't check this price, but it's not expensive. Link for Kindle. All right, so why do we need some of these special techniques, you might be wondering? Well, Houston, we have a problem. Oh, that doesn't sound good. All right, so that problem is called the forgetting curve. Let's take a look at this for a minute. When you first hear, this is a brain here and representation of retention. When you first hear something, you might understand it and remember it at the 100% level. But, okay, so we've got retention on this axis, and on the bottom we have days. Now look what happens one day after you've learned something. Let's go up the curve and see where we are. Oh my goodness, you've forgotten 50% of what you learned within 24 hours. Ouch. Well, let's go out to 7 days, a week. A week after you've learned something, you might retain 10% of it. Okay, well, we got 10, 11 weeks before we're going to take our test. How can anybody possibly pass? Okay, well, we're going to give you some methods to combat this problem. This has been studied for a really, really long time, back to the late 1800s. So this has been a subject of a lot of academic research. So I'm not just making this up. It's kind of like, here we go with some more analogies, like trying to string cranberries without a knot. In the good old days, maybe your grandparents, they decorate Christmas trees with cranberry strings. So you tie a string, you tie a knot on the end of the string, and then you take a needle and push the cranberry onto it. But if the string doesn't have a knot on it, the cranberries are just going to fall off when they get to the other side. So that's a part of our forgetting curve. That works the same way. Another picture, here we've got a bucket. Look how sad this bucket looks. We're trying to fill up that bucket, but it's leaking like crazy. That's like our brain, and that relates directly to the forgetting curve that we just saw. So here's another analogy. I like pineapple. It's one of my favorite fruits. And in this case, we're going to pretend that it takes 11 weeks to produce a pineapple. It actually takes a lot longer than that, but work with me on this, if you will. So it'll produce in 11 weeks. We're going to need 10 gallons of water spread evenly over the time period. Unfortunately, we have a leaky container. So, what can we do? And how does this relate to the real world? Well, here's our analogy. So, passing the exam is the fruit, 11 weeks, our exam. The amount of knowledge needed is the water. We've got 10 chapters we're going to be going through. Our learning is leaking. We saw the forgetting curve. So what can we do is the question, because you all want to pass, and you've all got this problem, even if you won't admit it. What can we do? All right, we have to interrupt the forgetting process. I don't know if tying a string on your finger will do it for you or not, but that's how some people remember things. So the actions we need to take, we need to plug the leaks, and we need to relearn where needed, right? And the next several slides, we're going to provide some very concrete ways that you can do this. We're going to talk about strategies that work and strategies that are not effective. What's really amazing is the strategies that are not effective are the strategies that quite often people are told in school are the strategies to use to learn. More on that to come. So the first one is called spaced repetition. Remember we said that you lose about half your knowledge after one day? Well, if you can refresh your knowledge by review, you'll bounce back up again. All right, and notice what's happening here. This time scale is expanding. So review in one day, and then don't review until the third day. And then don't review until maybe the sixth day. So the frequency of reviews, or refresh, if you want to call it that, it extends, it gets longer and longer. So you don't have to work as hard over time as long as you do it, let's say, 1 day, 3 day, in a week or so. That'll keep this knowledge up there for you. So every time you go to the filing cabinet and retrieve the info, the path becomes a little bit stronger. It's like a mouse path in a forest. If the mouse keeps going back and forth to the food, the path will become stronger and stronger. All right, so remember I said you needed 74% to pass your test? Let's draw a line here. Here's 74%. And if you can be reviewing the material, notice that you are keeping your knowledge well above the 74% line. So I hope you're starting to see how spaced repetition can be your friend. Some more strategies that work. One is handwritten notes. Look at this picture here. This is me over here. I'm presenting information in perfectly coherent, organized ways, all right? This might be what's happening in your brain. I'm probably That's, Gary says that's him. I'm not that good. I'm just being a little silly here. But a lot of times when you hear something new, this is what winds up over there. You get bits and pieces and you say, oh, I don't know how this is, you know, I can't get this. Well, handwritten notes do something very special. Handwritten notes are, it's impossible to take down the information verbatim because we talk a lot faster than we can write. So if you're taking handwritten notes, you have to be summarizing the information. In other words, you have to be hearing the basic concepts and just writing those down. You can't get every word. That's why handwritten notes are even better than typewritten notes, because some people can type almost as fast as somebody can speak. The idea isn't to get it verbatim. The idea is to get the concepts. And if you can do that, the act of regurgitating that information into the concepts and writing them down does much to cement that into your mind. So restate the main points in your own words. Create analogies that make sense to you. I've shared several so far in this presentation. You may be able to come up with others. Analogies are memory hooks. Okay, you've got things that you know already. Use those as memory hooks for things that you don't know yet by creating analogies. Memory mnemonics and cues. We'll be sharing some of these as we go through chapters to come, but there's ways that you can remember things. Spaced repetition, we've talked about already. We've got the forgetting curve or the remembering curve as it's being drawn here. Strategies that work. Use self-testing as a recall mechanism. A lot of people think of a test and they just go cold. They say, I'm going to be examined and I'm going to pass or fail, and I don't like that, okay? Well, self-testing can be your friend because it can tell you where your weaknesses are without having any major bad things happen to you as a result of it. You're just learning from them. Self-testing as a recall mechanism is a fabulous tool. And Gary shared a resource at the ARRL, the AppSpot and Learn, and I'll be hopefully giving you a demo on that in a future session. But this will help a lot, reviewing the material and self-testing. It's another way of doing spaced repetition as well. And accept that permanent learning takes time. I don't know if any of you have ever been, any of you besides Gary, have been in a situation where you cram for a test before, you know, the old college approach where you party all semester and then you cram the night before, you know, spend 8, 10 hours and don't get any sleep. Maybe you'll pass the test the next day, but do you think that you really learned the material? Probably not. Probably not. So accept that permanent learning takes time. And I've marked out the ones that are extremely important: spaced repetition, self-testing, and accept that permanent learning takes time. All right, a little bit more on this time aspect. Okay, so sleep is a wonderful thing. The brain does something called memory consolidation when you sleep. All of the facts that you absorbed in a day, the brain tries to sort those out into its own little filing cabinets during your sleep. It also washes out brain toxins that are there and helps you forget stuff that's not important so that your brain doesn't get so big that it explodes. So this is what you want. You want a brick wall of learning, solid retention, solid mastery. Not this, okay? Here we didn't give the concrete time to dry, or the mortar. We crammed the night before. This is what we wound up with. Maybe we'll pass the test, but there will be no long-lasting wall. So real concrete will set up in 24 to 48 hours. And I just saw a posting on one of the forums. Somebody was asking, well, how long should you let a tower base, a concrete tower base, cure before erecting the tower? And the consensus seemed to be about a month. I wouldn't think it would have been that long, but the point of it is that you have to give it time to cure for it to retain full strength. Learning works the same thing, works the same way. So illusions of competence, this was fascinating to me when I first learned about it, because some of these techniques are the ones that are recommended in school for ways that you should learn new things. Okay, repeated reading is the first one. First of all, notice this little light bulb over here. He doesn't, it's kind of a brainless looking light bulb, okay? He's really happy because he thinks he's learning, but guess what? He might not be learning what he thinks he's learning. Repeated reading is the first one on the list. Some people will read a section over and over and over again, thinking that they're getting it into long-term memory. That usually does not work. Rarely does that work. And the reason is that when you read it the first time, or maybe the second time, you've gained some information, but the third and fourth time, your mind will be saying, well, I already know this, and it'll just ignore your eye movement as it goes down the page. Won't really be helpful. That's an illusion of competence. You're working hard, but you're not achieving what you hope to. The next one is highlighting almost everything. Some people will look at a paragraph of information. Highlighting is okay, but just a few words. Get the main points. But when you highlight almost everything, well, you're expending a lot of effort, and you think that that effort translates into learning. Well, it really doesn't. It just translates into hand cramps. The logic of classroom explanations. This is a good one. We're going to go through some things. Gary and I will go through some things, and we've been doing these classes for a number of years. So we look at what people have trouble with, and then optimize the way that we teach it to help people understand. So we'll be going through an explanation. You'll say, "Oh yeah, I get that. I follow what you're saying," but do you really have it? You don't have it unless you can recall it on your own. So we'll plant the seeds and help you through it, but just being able to follow the classroom explanation doesn't mean that it's getting into your long-term memory. It will be if you go back and do it on your own. You recall it and then apply it. I've got a story about this one, doing repeated practice tests before knowing the material and its context. I have a good friend who's in the State Guard here in South Carolina, and they had ham radio equipment that was available to the State Guard to use, but they had no licensed operators. So my friend said, well, I can take care of that. So he worked on practice tests for, believe it or not, a solid year, went and took his ham test, and got 100% on everything. Do you know what he knew about radio? Absolutely nothing. But to his credit, he came back to our classes and went through them all, and he's an active ham today, and he knows what he's doing. But doing repeated practices before knowing the material and its context won't help you long term. It might help you short term. It's the cramming idea. All right, we talked about that. And none of these are effective for long-term memory. So these folks that use these techniques have never had a class on learning how to learn, which I'm sharing with you right now. Okay, did you know that your brain has a pinball machine inside of it?
That's why.
That's why, exactly. All right, so hopefully everybody knows what a pinball machine is. It's kind of a game machine that you can put coins in, and then you pull a plunger and the ball shoots up and it bounces off all of these rubber bumpers and eventually falls back down to the bottom. So what we're going to look at here is the pinball machine in your brain. And we're going to talk about the focus mode and the diffuse mode. The focus mode is when you're intensely working on a problem, like where did I leave my car keys? Or how do I solve this problem? So that question gets launched, and it bounces around in a fairly narrow part of your brain. You've got all of the usual places where you usually lose your keys, but you're not finding them. Okay, so if you can let that go, set it down, set the problem down, come back a little while later, what you're not aware of is that your brain continues to work in the background in what's called diffuse mode. And in diffuse mode, those thoughts can go all over your brain. The answer that you need is down here someplace. Well, we're never going to find it up here, but it'll come to you, and a little bit later you'll say, oh, I know where it is, or I've got some new ideas. So that's a mechanism that, that works. Another interesting aspect of this is these modes are mutually exclusive. When you're in the focus mode, you can't be in the diffuse mode, and vice versa. That's why it's necessary to let it go for a little while, let your mind work on it, and come back to it. Most of us have had what we call an aha moment, where we're really struggling with something. We go to sleep. Sleep is the ultimate diffuse mode. In the morning you wake up and you have an aha moment. Oh, I know what that answer is, because your brain figured it out when it was in the diffuse mode. So let's talk about some learning techniques that work. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here. We're going to come back to focus and diffuse in a minute. So recommend that you read recreationally at first. So when you're going through the chapter, look at the bold type, look at the titles, look at the pictures. Just kind of cruise through it that way. You're reading recreationally at first, and then the next time go through, read for deeper understanding. Barbara Oakley calls this a picture walk. It plants seeds in your mind, memory hooks sometimes, and you'll learn better. Now back to focus and diffuse. Here's a technique. It's called the Pomodoro technique, which we'll talk more about in a bit. So the concept is 25 minutes of intense focused study. Now why could this be helpful? Well, first of all, when you're needing to learn something and it's intimidating, the easiest thing to do is to procrastinate, put it off. It hurts, it's painful, I don't want to do this. Okay, well, I can do 25 minutes. Anybody can do 25 minutes. So do 25 minutes of intense, focused study. Then do anything else to disconnect. The brain is now going to be working in diffuse mode, sorting out some of these things that you worked on, and then you can come back to focus mode later and reinforce some of this stuff. And the whole concept here is you're not trying to finish what you're working on in 25 minutes, you're just wanting to make progress. And back to the aha experience. Yeah, we've all had that. So over on the calculator cam, I have a tomato, I hope. Yeah, there he is. A tomato. Well, this is really a kitchen timer, all right? I've got this on Amazon. There's also apps that you can look for that will do this to allow you to do something called the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro is tomato in Italian. So the fellow who came up with this, Francesco Cirillo is his name, in the late 1980s, this is the first thing that he grabbed, and so he called this technique the Pomodoro technique. So what do? You eliminate distractions. You set the timer for 25 minutes. For some people, some instrumental music, classical music helps. The Mozart effect, some of you may have heard about. Somewhat controversial, but this is helpful to me. Then blitz. Study as hard as you can for 25 minutes. Then your timer will go off. So pause, disconnect completely, and then come back. So pet your dog, feed your goldfish, pull some weeds out of your garden, do something. And then come back, or you can study in an unrelated area, come back and do another Pomodoro, another 25-minute session, continuing on from where you left off. Now, Thomas Edison had a very interesting technique. Other famous people have done some similar things, but it's said that Thomas Edison, when he was struggling with a problem, would put ball bearings in his hand and go sit in his most comfy recliner, okay? And as he'd start drifting off to sleep, what do you think would happen to the ball bearings? Well, his hand would loosen, the bearings would fall to the floor, and it would wake him up, okay? So at that point, he had many times when the solution to his problem or a new aspect of pursuing it would come to him. And so he was using the Pomodoro technique before it was really defined by our friend Francisco. So that's fascinating. More learning techniques that work. Well, make links to similar concepts, that's analogies. You've already got a whole bunch of things that you know. How is this new information similar to what you've already learned in another realm? An analogy, related knowledge. Okay, or which kind of a learner are you? What's your learning preference? Well, try all three, and we'll give you that opportunity as we go through our classes. Engage all possible senses. This is, again, something that I think Barbara recommended. Imagine the concept, and tell yourself a story about it. In our ham radio worlds, you could say, well, when I pass my general class, I'll be able to do DX and contesting. That would be really cool, okay? Motivation. Write out the concept by hand. Try teaching it to another person. This is a tremendous way to learn. There's a quote here that one of our students passed along to me in the past. Thoughts disentangle themselves when they pass through the lips and fingertips. Dawson Trotman, who I really don't know anything about, but let's dig into what he's saying here. Thoughts disentangle themselves when they pass through the lips and fingertips. Remember when I was talking about handwritten notes? Well, those thoughts are passing through your fingertips. What if you're teaching another person or trying to explain it to another person? That's thoughts passing through your lips. So thoughts disentangle themselves when they pass through the lips and the fingertips. I thought that was great. There's another quote that's attributed to a fairly smart guy that I think you've probably heard of, Albert Einstein, and he said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, okay? All right, so Gary's waving his hand. Yeah, I get that. A technique that I've heard recommended to college students in advanced technical areas is that try to explain this concept to a grade schooler, okay? If they can take the high-level concept and boil it down and explain it to somebody who has no background in that area whatsoever, that will greatly reinforce your understanding of the concept. So if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself. I thought that was awesome. So learning techniques that work. Now we have a happier, less mindless light bulb over here. So recall from memory without looking at the solution. So this would be like one of the math problems in chapter 4. So read the question and discern what it's asking. Are they asking for resistance or voltage or current? What is it that they're asking for? Recall what you know about it. So what I'm describing here is you see something that is scary and you don't have any idea how to approach it. Well, you know more about it than what you might think. So that's what these steps are. Read the question, discern what it's asking, recall what you know about it, draw a diagram. This can be tremendously helpful. Recall from memory how to solve it, if you can, and then solve it. Well, maybe you weren't successful. If you weren't successful, use the references as may be necessary to help you through that. Then come back later and try again. When you can do this without any references, you have now got this technique in your long-term memory, and you can pull it out and use it on your test or in future points in your ham radio career. So it's a step-by-step process when you're up against something that looks tough. So what do you do between classes? What you do between classes is probably more important than anything Gary and I can share with you in these classes. We'll plant the seeds and get you going in the right direction on the important principles. Then you need to exercise spaced repetition so you don't lose it. Use self-testing as a recall mechanism, and accept that permanent learning takes time. Now, if you notice I've said this more than once, that's another example of spaced repetition within a single class. So here we go. We want this versus this. Now, our friend that shared this with me, Michael Burnett, in that class that I was in at Hamcation in 2019, he had a list of what he called fast-track tips. His recommendation, commit to a date and stick to it. Gary recommended earlier that you find a testing session and sign up for it. Okay, that's great motivation to being ready when you get there. Make a study schedule and stick to it. Study with a friend if you can. read and recall, and engage lots of senses. A little story here. You can imagine how good you'd feel when you passed the test. There was one fellow that I was working with. He was in his 80s. Unfortunately, he's passed on now, but he wasn't able to pass his test on the first try. And I asked him, well, you know, why do you think that is? He says, well, I've got my own method of learning. So that wasn't working out so good for him because he didn't pass. So he thought he didn't need to really pay attention to all of this crazy stuff that I'm sharing with you. He'd do it his own way. Well, he didn't pass. So we got together at a Starbucks, and for over about a 6-week period, we went through the different chapters. Then he went and tested again, and he passed. I was one of the VEs in his testing session. He came up to me afterwards and said, Dave, this is the happiest moment of my life. So, you know, this stuff works, okay? That's why I'm sharing it with you. Not only for passing your test, but what about your kids, your grandkids? These principles will go way, way beyond just passing your test, and I hope they'll have that impact in your life. So study with a friend, read and recall, engage lots of senses. Remember our pineapple, what does it smell like? What does it taste like? Learn material first, then do the practice exams. Build your own context. That's like analogies and memory hooks. Take breaks, very important. Learn more than necessary. You're going to run across some things that, in spite of what we share in our classes and what's in the book, they're still going to be really fuzzy. Well, you've got a friend that can help you. That friend is called Google, okay? So you can take a concept and Google it and get all kinds of supplemental information that might help some of this stuff click for you. Learn more than necessary. Explain material to other people. Don't put off the hard stuff. Address it head on. And get a solid night's sleep before the exam. Now the cramming, the old college cramming trick, well, not only were they not getting a good grasp of the material into long-term memory, but the brain works much less efficiently when it's tired. So number 11 says, get a solid night's sleep before the exam. And note, if you do not do number 11, the other 10 may not matter because your brain will be mush. All right, so next week, we're going to have more fun. We're going to be into Chapter 2. It's Operating Principles for HF, which I'll be going through. And we're going to have a good time going through that. It's stuff that's new on HF. If you've only operated 2 meters on VHF, a lot of this will be new, but it's easy stuff, and it's very valuable. So with that, do you have anything else to add, Gary?
No, we have something that we call the class chat at the end of each class. If there's any comments or questions from the Zoom classroom, you can go ahead and unmute and ask them, and we'll do our best to answer. Anything tonight? Nothing heard.
Did anything here sound like it might be beneficial to you? Any reactions to what either Gary or I covered?
So I've had a career in higher education, but hearing this stuff again is very useful because sometimes we forget those very foundations and move on to higher level stuff. So appreciate taking the time to help us think about how we learn.
Good. Thank you. We've had all kinds of positive feedback about this that we always try to include very early in our class series. We do this in the extra class as well. Okay, anything else?
All right, well, we appreciate you. Hope to see some of you maybe in Orlando at Hamcation this weekend. And until next week, I'll say 73.
Yep.
See you next week.
You bet.
Thank you.
You bet.
See you next week.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Maybe I'll have my camera working by then.